You would not believe what just happened. Guys, I just watched Robert Kiyosaki's appearance on the Valuetainment podcast with Patrick Bet-David. And well, in this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my response to Robert's stance and statement. And I'm also going to give you guys my thoughts as well in the form of 3 main points on what I believe is going to happen to the housing market and overall real estate if America were to adopt socialist and democratic socialist views. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Daniel Kwok, one half of the Kwok Brothers. And well, recently it seems that the election is the only thing that people can talk about. And well, in light of recent events, it may seem, now of course nothing is official yet, but the way it looks like Joe Biden will be entering the White House along with his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, guys, one observation that I made a lot actually is, well, it seems that a lot of individuals in my generation is kind of taking up the stance of this whole democratic socialism idea. And I've seen it all over Facebook, Instagram, social media in general. And well, it seems that everybody is kind of adopting this stance of democratic socialism, which leads to something I've watched rather recently when Robert Kiyosaki made an appearance on the Valuetainment podcast with Patrick Bet-David, which, by the way, is one of my favorite people to follow on YouTube. And well, this is what Robert said in the podcast.
This was more than an election. This was a turning of America. I think we're sliding into socialism. And as you know, because you have the book of Marx and Ayn Rand on your portrait behind you, we're going communist. You say Biden is not going to read your book for you. Biden is not going to teach you a new skill. But I'm afraid that you're going to need them, because this election was more than an election. This is what I fought against. I went to Vietnam twice as a Marine, and I fought against what's happening in America. I fought against socialism and communism.
Now, guys, what Robert just said there is extremely bold, right? There's no two ways about it. He's very clear in saying that, well, this election was about democratic socialism and socialism in general, everything that he's fought for, right, when he went to Vietnam, taking over the United States of America. Now, guys, I will say this. I haven't been around long enough to know what life when politics was like 30, 40 years ago. But in many ways, right, studying history, studying the markets, and kind of seeing the stance of a lot of individuals, a lot of friends who are my age who agree with democratic socialism, and a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters and AOC supporters, I can probably confirm Robert's statements to be true. Now, guys, having said that, I do agree with Robert. And well, overall, I don't think it's going to do a whole lot of good for the housing market and the overall economy. So I'm going to give you guys my thoughts in the form of 3 main points on what I believe is going to happen in terms of what will happen to the housing market and the real estate market if socialism and democratic socialism were to take over. Now, guys, before we go ahead and talk about these things, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video as well. Share it with your friends, because this is a discussion that's very hot right now. The future of the United States for the next 4 years, considering who just quote unquote won the office. Now, guys, let's talk first about what socialist theory says, right? In terms of how it views economics, how it views housing. And guys, I did my fair share. I actually did hours of research today in terms of what socialist does say about the housing market and how economics should be treated, because, well, at the end of the day, it is an economic philosophy. So all in all, if I were to sum it up in one sentence, it seems that socialist theory, in terms of how it views housing, states that housing is controlled and owned by either the government or the public living in it, representing a shared ownership model. And based on all the articles, all the questions that I asked, and pretty much everything that I've seen in my research with socialist theory, that seems to be the most universally accepted statement from individuals who stand by democratic socialism, especially those who endorse and follow guys like Bernie Sanders and also women like AOC. So on to the 3 points. So here's my opinion and my thoughts, and leave below in the comments what you think in terms of response and feedback to what I believe will happen if the housing market and real estate is run by socialistic philosophies. So point number 1, in my opinion, I don't think socialism will do anything to fix or help mitigate affordable housing crisis that we have and have had for the last 3 years. And well, matter of fact, when I read a lot of different articles, right, they used a lot of statistics and facts that talk about how, housing is becoming less affordable, how rent has gone up. But well, in my opinion, and the reason why I make it point number 1 is because, well, I don't think socialism will help any of that. And well, I want to point you guys to something that already exists, right? There's actually a very pro socialistic solution that already exists right now, and that, my friends, is called Section 8. Well, Section 8's actually been around for a very long time. Matter of fact, it was passed by Congress in 1974, and it was called the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Well, let's look at what Section 8 even is. Well, Section 8 was designed to help poor families get out of tough areas so they could, go to better schools and ultimately live a better lifestyle. Well, it was a program that was supposed to be a win-win for everyone. The main premise of the program was that, well, tenants who are financially challenged would actually have a majority of their rent be covered in the form of a government voucher. Now, some Section 8 vouchers can be 50%, it could be 60%, and I've seen Section 8 vouchers go as high as 90 to 95%, meaning that if somebody rented out an apartment for $1,000, that $900 to $950 will be covered by this government voucher. And well, in theory, it was supposed to be a win-win for landlords as well because, they would receive quote-unquote guaranteed rent. And at first, it did go rather well. But however, as the years went on, we actually saw that landlords were actually losing in this quote-unquote win-win scenario. Well, why is that? Well, it's because, Section 8, when it was passed, it was very clear that it was going to be significantly harder for landlords to evict tenants. And well, who's paying for that voucher? The tenant is not paying their small share of the rent. I mean, guys, imagine being a landlord and having a tenant where the rent is $1,000 a month. They have a voucher for $750 and they can't come up with $250 a month to pay their share of the rent. In that case, who's really being punished, right? If the voucher isn't being given and the rent isn't being paid, well, who's really paying the price? Who's being punished? Is it the tenant or is it the landlord? Well, I would say the landlord is actually being more punished because, well, it's the actions of the tenant that's now affecting and hurting the landlord. The landlord who has to cover all the operational expenses, the landlord who still by law has to pay for all the utilities, who still has to cover the mortgage, who still has to cover the liabilities, the insurance, and all these things that go in to actually running a building for his or her tenants. Another thing is that landlords quickly found out that, well, their units would actually end up being in horrible condition after their Section 8 tenant would leave. And it would end up costing them thousands and sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars in damages. So what happened as a result of that, right? Well, cause and effect, landlords started rejecting Section 8 tenants in areas of a certain quality. And well, I wouldn't blame them, right? Like if you guys had a rental unit, a Class A building, right, in which you guys spend tens of thousands of dollars on the appliances, on the countertops, would you put a tenant in there that is going to end up costing you tens of thousands of dollars in damages? They were going to destroy everything that you put into the building and it was going to be in horrible condition. Would you put that tenant in there, or would you put in the tenant that has strong financials, they have a good job, they're well put together, they're respectful, and they're able to cover the rent on their own based on the job that they have on a monthly basis? Which tenant would you put in there? I think the answer is pretty clear. And well, in my opinion, if you really want Section 8 to work for everyone the way that it was designed for, and if you really want to help the public and increase affordable housing, I would actually also include vouchers for landlords as well, right? But only in situations if their Section 8 tenant ends up leaving thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars worth of damages. Because, well, if that happens, then it actually makes it worth it for the landlords to take on these Section 8 tenants in higher quality areas where they have nicer schools, where they have better infrastructure, where crime is lower, right? I think it would really help out a lot of poor families as well, because at the end of the day, guys, landlords don't have the money to be able to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 every time a tenant moves out, right? It's just not in the cards. And well, considering that most landlords are not large corporations, they're not government entities that have millions of dollars in their pocket, I think that's the most viable solution in which everyone plays and everyone genuinely wins. And guys, to continue with my first point on why I believe socialist concepts will not help affordable housing crisis issues, we gotta look at a case study. We gotta look at a city that has and have currently socialist concepts right now when it comes to their housing market. And that place, my friends, it's called New York City. So check this out, guys. New York public housing system began in 1930s and actually stands as one of the world's largest public housing institutions right now. Matter of fact, it currently houses 400,000 low-income New Yorkers, which represents 1 out of every 14 residents in the city of New York. It's been around for about 90 years. Well, let's look at the results of the past 90 years. Almost every building has reports of multiple instances of rats, mold, broken water heaters, leaks, faulty elevators, cracked sidewalks, and the list goes on and on and on and on in terms of deferred maintenance issues, infrastructure issues, and even breaking human housing standards. Now, according to the Washington Post, guys, who ran a study on the New York public housing system, the average age of a system within a building is over 60 years old. Yet deferred maintenance is so bad that barring dramatic changes, some 90% of systems units will no longer be cost effective to repair by the year 2027. And on top of that, it's actually estimated that the city will need $31.8 billion over the next 5 years to fix the hole that it's dug itself in the last 90 years or so. It got so bad, matter of fact, that the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, right, who by the way, guys, is known as ultra progressive and right up there with AOC, faced a lawsuit with the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, in which post-settlement, guys, Blasio administration released a statement admitting that the housing market, right, I'm reading it right off the paper here, guys, admitted that the housing authority not only failed to maintain buildings properly, but also covered up its actions, training its staff on how to mislead federal inspectors and presenting false reports to the government and to the public about its compliance with lead paint regulations. Which, guys, leads me to point number 2, which is that democratic socialism would actually hurt the tenants financially as opposed to what it's claiming to be in terms of helping out the greater good. It's going to actually hurt them. Well, why is that? Well, let's take a look here. Who would you rather have as the landlord, right? The New York City Public Housing, which, by the way, cut their spending by $2.7 billion the last 19 years, or would you rather have a landlord that you can actually talk to and build a relationship with? Matter of fact, let's put it in other words. Where would you guys rather eat? Would you guys rather eat at a restaurant like McDonald's, where, you know, it's a corporate chain, right? They have protocols for making fries, right? And it's not going to be the most healthiest for you. Or would you rather eat at that family-owned restaurant in which they put hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money and also care for the place like it's their own? They care for the customers. They have quality control. They make sure everything's correct. And again, they've spent their own money and their own investment to make sure that the restaurant is best for the experience of the customers. Which one would you guys rather work with, right? And I think it's pretty clear who's going to be more flexible, who's going to be more willing to work with the tenants during troubled times. I think, again, the answer is pretty clear. But of course, there's a lot of you guys that say, well, but Daniel, what about, the co-ownership model? What about, what if the tenants, all collectively own the building? Well, let's take a look at that, because I think there are cons, but there's also pros with that as well. The first one being, well, the tenants in that case scenario would collect their own cash flow, right? And well, one of the reasons why we invest in real estate is because, well, not only do we want the tax benefits, the appreciation, the equity accumulation, but we also want the monthly cash flow. Well, guys, let me tell you guys the truth, right? The truth of the matter is that operational expenses are going to take up 50% of your gross income. As a matter of fact, the National Survey for Multifamily Housing did a study about a year ago in 2019 saying that about 47% of gross rent actually go towards operational expenses on a month-to-month basis, which is stuff like maintenance, taxes, insurance, utilities, management, right? These are all things that take into account when we're managing a piece of real estate. And well, if you also throw in debt service, which AKA the mortgage payment, you're probably only going to take about 20% of gross income in cash flow. Now, guys, having said that, those are only months in which something doesn't happen. And well, that kind of leads to my point of, well, what happens if, the place needs a new roof, which it does every 20 years. And guys, a new roof on an apartment complex, I've had to pay for myself. My 36-unit building that I own, the roofing job costs $60,000 because, well, there's 3 12-unit buildings and each building costs $20,000 for a new roof. So if there's a bill for $20,000 in a new roofing job, well, what happens if half the tenants aren't able to pay for that, right? They're not able to pay, their fair share of the roof. What happens if there needs to be a new washer and dryer? What about new carpet? Who pays for these things, right? And if it's collective, what happens again if half the tenants are not able to fork over their share? So on the positive end, right, they get a 20% cash flow every single month, but only on months where nothing bad happens and nothing needs to be replaced. Well, now let's talk about the cons, because, well, you can't enjoy the benefits of ownership unless you also take on the liabilities. And well, that's what landlords do. They get the benefit because they take on the liabilities. Well, my question is, in the model where the tenants, own the property, they own the real estate, and they're the landlords themselves, right? It's a co-ownership shared model. Well, what happens if there's 3 or 4 items that doesn't meet inspection code according to the city? Who takes care of that aspects? Well, what about delinquencies? Who handles the eviction process? If the tenant can't pay and it's actually bringing down the income of the entire building, since now the tenants own the building, who handles these things? What about delinquencies? What about background checks? What about, the leasing process, right? There's a lot of liabilities that go. What about lawsuits? It's another thing that landlords have to deal with. What about issues with compliance? Who's going to deal with these liabilities, right? Because, well, we think about these things, and according to a lot of the articles that I read that endorse socialism for housing, they only mention the benefits, right? They only mention that, the good things about the tenants owning the piece of property. But again, I have a lot of questions on what would occur if a lot of these liabilities and deductions were to happen. What happens? Who's responsible for all those things, right? Because we can't have the benefits without the liabilities. Let's move on to point number 3, which I believe it would actually cripple lower and middle class Americans in their ability to move upwardly. So let me start off by saying I believe America truly is the land of opportunity, right? There's a reason why by far there's no country that comes even close in terms of people wanting to move here. And I'm an immigrant myself, right, along with Sam and obviously my entire family. And well, when we came to this country, we actually had nothing. As a matter of fact, in my childhood, I remember multiple instances where our family actually slept in the car because we weren't able to afford our heating bill, right? So for a lot of individuals screaming and shouting, oh, these Americans in poverty, guys, I've been there. I was the American in poverty, right? I mean, matter of fact, our family couldn't even speak English, so we couldn't actually even apply for food stamps. We couldn't apply for government housing because, well, first off, we were in a new country and we didn't even know those things existed. Well, how did I get to where I am today, where I have the honor and pleasure of being able to make these YouTube videos and help other people get to where I am? It's through being a landlord and acquiring, and learning creative ways to acquire multifamily properties like I did in my whole career. Well, guys, let me give you guys this statistic saying that 90% of millionaires in America are actually created through investing in real estate. That's a true fact. You can look it up. It's not through stocks. It's not through commodities. It's not through bonds. It's through real estate, in which 90% of millionaires are created. Now, guys, let me preface this by saying a millionaire is not as rich as you think it is, right? When you guys think millionaire, right, when I say the word millionaire, you guys probably think of Lamborghinis and super nice mansions and never having any money problems and life just being granular and going on a vacation every single week, while the average working class American has to eat dirt and work hard every single day. Well, guys, that's actually not true. Matter of fact, if you own a house, chances are you are a millionaire. It just simply means that your net worth is above $1 million. Well, guess what? If you have a car that's paid off, that's part of your net worth. If you have your house paid off, that's part of your net worth. How much you make, the cash that you have, is part of your net worth. So guys, being a millionaire today, because of the inflation that's happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years, is not as impressive as it is. Matter of fact, Grant Cardone on YouTube says time and time again, if you're a millionaire, you're in the middle class, right? Or at most, you're in the upper middle class. Guys, this whole idea of millionaire, they don't have as much money as you think, which also leads me to say that a lot of landlords are also not as rich as people think. Matter of fact, there's multiple surveys and studies that show that a vast majority of people who are landlords are not government entities or large corporations that have millions of dollars to spend. They're actually regular mom and pops that also have money troubles as much as their tenants do, right? So in my opinion, guys, if you take a socialistic stance in terms of the housing market, in the real estate market, you're really crippling the ability for lower class Americans and middle class Americans to move forward and have upward mobility. As a matter of fact, specifically 90% of Americans to have upward mobility. That's how I got to where I am today, and that's how my brother and I went from negative $187 in our bank account to having maxed out credit cards, to our family literally being as impoverished as you could possibly be in this country, to where we are today, where I'm actually able to help my parents financially, where I'm able to help other people financially and employ them and provide opportunities and put free stuff out on YouTube. What do you think is going to happen? I agree with Robert Kiyosaki. These are my thoughts on what would happen to the housing market and the real estate market if we were to start adopting socialist concepts. But again, I want to hear your thoughts, right? Your thoughts on what you believe is going to happen to the housing market if we were to start becoming more socialist, if we were to start adopting these socialist concepts. And well, do you even think that America is going to become socialist? Any thoughts you have on this topic? I want to see it. I want to learn myself. And of course, guys, before you go, don't forget to get your free copy of this book, 0 to 75 Units in 1 Year. It's 290 pages of case studies, stories, techniques on how my brother and I went from 0 to 75 units in 1 year and how you guys can do it too. So again, guys, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.